And there was a time that, and I think this was part of me being there. There was a time when I said, look, I mean, now me, other people, it may not take this, but for me, it took getting to the point where I had no vehicle, I had no shelter, I had nobody to give me $50, I had nobody to give me a job or a leg up, where I finally, I said, God, you know, I hate to say I have no choice but to turn to you, because that sure doesn't sound like, but man, God, I have nowhere else to go.
When it's been said, when you hit rock bottom,
right,
you still have the rock.
Exactly.
He's
exactly.
There. He's there.
And he was for me, and I have come to understand now and be so much calmer in the circumstances that I didn't understand what was going on. That's always been my big aggravation with God, by the way, is he never seems to be under any obligation to tell me what he's doing. But it always has a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the thing that's kind of scary for us sometimes is that, you know, most of us as human beings, most of us don't know the first names of our great-grandparents. It's hard for us to think beyond 3 and 4 generations. I mean, we think about and then we think about this way, but 3 or 4 generations is generally all we really think. And so it's tough to conceive of a God that is thinking and planning in hundreds of generations. And so sometimes it may be tough for us to understand that what is going on here may not show up in your life on earth, okay, but it is in a greater plan. And when we understand, you know, what a difference we make with every move we make, it's huge.
So these biographies, then you start making notes, and you're getting these principles that you're pulling out of it. There seems to be similarities in these things. Then tell us about when you started to actually apply those things in your life and how things started to change.
Well, you know, one thing is it took a while. Okay, I mean, I'll just tell you, it took a while. You know, sometimes I speak or I'm somewhere and people say, wow, I wish I'd have met you 25, 30 years ago. And I'm like, no, you didn't want to meet me 30 years ago, because it took a while. You know, even though I knew, and even today, you know, I tell people, look, just because I know these things, don't think I'm great at them, okay? I mean, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a business person, I'm an author, and I'm trying hard too. And I'm still learning. I mean, part of the reason that I wrote Mastering the 7 Decisions, honestly, is because The Traveler's Gift, it came out like 4 years ago, but I wrote it 8 years ago. It took a long time to get it published. And I realized that in the seminars that I was doing, the speaking engagements I was doing, more than 50% of the stuff I was presenting, I had learned since I wrote The Traveler's Gift. And so there's so much more stuff, you know, so much more in that book than there was in the original presentation of the decisions. And so to say that I really threw them in my life and things changed, I'm still doing it. I mean, I'm still learning so much about them. But to start to apply them, and I'll tell you honestly, one of the huge things that happened was in Today I Will Choose to Be Happy. Okay, this was the 5th decision. Now, I didn't really like that one, okay, because I wasn't really feeling happy all the time, and I didn't really understand choosing to be happy. And people say, well, why did you put it in the book? I didn't put it in the book because I necessarily, well, let's say this. I did understand them when I put them in the book, but when I was seeing them, when I was lining them up after reading the biographies, I wasn't choosing them because I liked them or even understood them. I chose them because they were. You know, I mean, when you see 200 people in a book and you say this person, even in the worst time of their life, they chose to be happy. They chose to come across as a happy person. Then you put it on your list. And so I didn't necessarily like it when I was starting to apply it, because I didn't really understand that you can't really say, wow, 5 seconds ago I chose to be happy and now I really am. I mean, that's ridiculous, okay? But you can choose to be grateful. You can choose to be grateful, and you can choose to sit down and write down 100 things you have to be grateful for, and when you get up from the table, you will feel what many of us refer to as happiness. Now, the thing about this whole principle, choosing to be happy, it affects us, it affects the people around us, it incredibly even affects our income. because of the way that, people like to be around happy people. People give opportunities to happy people. People are clients of happy people. People say yes to happy people. And what do people do to moany, groany, whiny, complaining people? They avoid them, right? And so they get fewer opportunities, less encouragement, more no's. And so one of the things that I learned and this will take 15 seconds, but I've learned, and I learned then, such a huge thing, was to smile while I talk. Very few people do this. And I found at an early time, before I ever got a car, before I ever got a job, before I ever got, had anything, I understood that there was something about looking at people, and I'm not saying be Bozo the Clown, I'm just saying getting your countenance up, get your eyebrows up, get your, the corners of your mouth up, and smiling while you talk, that people respond to that. And that people will talk to you, and people listen to you, and people will help. And so it's a huge, huge thing. And amazingly, I go in with corporations and teach sales teams to smile while they talk. How crazy is that?
Yeah, so basic.
Well, I know you went well beyond those 200 biographies, and you started interviewing people, one-on-one, well-known, successful people, like that you mentioned about Bob Hope.
I was going to say, you sat down by the pool with Bob Hope.
In his backyard.
In his backyard. How cool is that?
It was very neat, you know. And he was such a great guy. I had the opportunity to work with him a few times before that, and we got to be, not close, intimate friends, but we got to be buddies. We got to be buddies, and we would tease each other. And there was a time there that we spent there in his backyard talking about and questioning some things, and so it was great.
So when you say work with him, you have to.
I actually used to work as a comedian.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you guys knew that, but
I read that.
Yeah, we did.
I mean,
we know everything.
That's kind of scary, isn't it? And this is one of those kind of things that I look and I see that God had me in His plan, because I always wanted to be a speaker. I always felt like I was supposed to be a communicator of God's principles, and I always thought that I was supposed to be a speaker. But, I look back on it now and I realize, when you're in your 20s, when you're early 30s, who wants to hear what you got to say? Right? And so there was this period of time that I was almost drawn into comedy. And I worked as a stand-up comedian. I mean, I literally toured with Joan Rivers, with Kenny Rogers, with Garth Brooks, with Cher, with Dolly Parton, and I was in Las Vegas, and the thing that I learned to do was communicate with people and make them laugh. And so, now as a speaker, I told my wife, I said, it's not, people don't want me to speak because I'm any good. It's because nobody's doing what I'm doing. Every speaker can tell a joke, but I don't tell jokes. I deliver these principles with humor. And so.
Now, a second ago, you said God's principles.
Right.
And so you're obviously saying that this is not something that I've just discovered that are Andy's principles. These are really, so there must be some correlation between this book and the bestseller of all time. Absolutely,
there is, and I'm careful to say that, because I don't want anybody to think, I didn't come up with these. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, when you hear them, you'll know. Well, obviously, you didn't come up with them. But the cool thing about them, and the reason I say obviously you didn't come up with them, because, and I hate doing interviews where they say you have 3 minutes. Tell us the 7 decisions.
Yeah.
Because when you say persist, well, that's not exactly groundbreaking. Yeah. Right? Yeah. When you say a person of action, it's like, oh, I never heard that before. These are things that you have heard before, but somehow we have ignored the power that they have when they're grouped together, and the life-changing ability. And see, the reason they work every time really is their principles. They're just God's principles. These are just like the principle of gravity. Right? I mean, the principle of gravity was working long before the apple ever fell on Newton's head. But once it did, and once he understood it, then we as a society were free to harness those principles to create airline flight and suspension bridges. Well, the principles of what I call personal success, principles in your relationships, principles in your marriage, the principles of parenting, the principles of finances, these are God's principles too.
And we're going to be partaking of these principles for the whole month.
We'll be giving you time each day, several minutes in our Truth to Go series, and I'm just looking forward to getting that, and you'll want to tune in every day to get that. But even more than that, to get the rest of the story, we want to get a copy of this to you, Mastering the 7 Decisions. It's our special ministry gift offer to thank you for your support of the ministry for this month of March. And so, Andy, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Andy.
Oh, thank you.
It's nice to get to know you.
Listen, it's an honor to be here with you guys. I am thrilled.
Oh, thank
All right.
you.
Well, thanks so much. And
Yeah.
make sure you get the book. In fact, take a look at this and you'll find out how.